So it'll be Michigan against Purdue. The Boilermakers not ranked in the top 25, and surprisingly, teams in conference championship games not ranked in the top 25 have a decent record. They're 5-5 all time. As we welcome in Anthony Bellino. You see him every morning right here on BCSN as part of the X's and Bros show. Anthony, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Mark, always a pleasure, my friend. What's going on over there? Anything happened this past weekend?
Well, there was a couple of football games this past weekend, and if I recall, a week ago, you told us that if there was a blowout in this game, then we would learn something. Well, I would call 45-23 a blowout. We certainly learned that Michigan is the better team this year, and it's certainly becoming evident they're the better program than Ohio State over the last 2 years.
Oh, you almost made me jump out of my seat right there, Mark. I was going to say, what do you mean just better program this year? I'm talking about going down to the shoe, right? Everybody was talking about, well, it could be 40 degrees. There might be some precipitation, then all that chatter because, weather people, whether they're right or whether they're wrong, you don't really know anyways. You go outside, you figure out the weather when you get out there, right? Then we go outdoors. It's a noon kickoff. It's 50 degrees. It's sunny. It's in the shoe. Everyone's like, well, there's no rain. There's no precipitation. What do we know about Blake Corum? Oh, it's going to be a Buckeyes route. Michigan, well, not so fast, my friend. How about that second half from the Wolverines, the kings of adjustments? It wasn't just this year. It wasn't just last year. You mentioned it. The better program, Mark. This is the pendulum swing. I thought last year, maybe it was an anomaly. We'll see. There's no way that the Ryan Day and the Buckeyes can do all that talking for 364 days. They've got the scars to prove it. And we've been working on this game. We've been talking about this game. Blah, 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 blah. A lot of chatter, right? Not a whole lot of activity there in the second half for Ohio State's offense. We heard about C.J. Stroud, the Heisman candidate. We're taking calls in the morning. Should the Lions draft C.J. Stroud with that Rams pick that's flying up the charts, getting closer and closer to number one as we speak? And wouldn't you look at that? Michigan's defense answers the bell like a championship fighter every single time. This right here, Mark, what we are seeing on the Harbaugh hotline here, this right here could be a program like this. This is devastating for Ohio State. They are not equipped. They are not prepared. I've been dealing with this for 15 years, Mark. They aren't ready for this. Multiple losses, back-to-back seasons. Urban Meyer there on the set for Fox's Big Noon Kickoff, talking all that smack pregame, and then in the postgame, fans chanting, "We want Urban." You think he doesn't hear that? This program that he built, his heir to the throne that he selected because, well, it was really his idea to leave anyways, but neither here nor there. And now he's 0-2 against Michigan. There's no way they can let this stand. Mark, I'm having the best week ever, my friend. This is great. This is the pendulum swinger right here from Michigan football. I talked to Brian Blair, the athletic director at the University of Toledo, and one of his questions that he asked me when we were having lunch together, he said, are you prepared to handle success? And that really is the question. That's where I think that every athletic department, every head coach in every sport has to be able to answer that question. Are we prepared to handle success? The answer is, if you're Michigan football, yes, you were. You were absolutely prepared for this football game. You knew what to expect. You stuck to your guns. And even when the run game and Ohio State wanted to stack 8, 9, 48 guys in the box, they were able to find the big plays in the pass game that we hadn't seen all season. Mark, I was flabbergasted. I said, the whole day Saturday, I sat around like this.
So let me ask you this. What took Jim Harbaugh so long to get the program back up to this standard?
Well, I think that part of it is he's hired younger, right? So he wanted to find coordinators and guys that would maybe relate a little bit more, to his players. Because if you watch him, if you're close enough to the sidelines and you just watch him, he's on the outside of those huddles most of the time. He'll give a couple words to a couple of players coming on the field or walking off the field. But outside of that, he really he's done a really good job of delegating, right? I want you to run this offense. Both of those coordinators on the defensive side. I want you to run this defense. And this is what we kind of want to look like. How do we make that happen? I think he's done a really good job of delegating that. He's also done a really good job of building a culture. And with the news of Cade McNamara entering the transfer portal, I think it's appropriate to say thank you to him, because without him, I don't know where this program is at. He took it on his chin. He was the one who got this team to where they were at last season. He was the one that had to bow out this season and then get injured. And we watched this ascension of J.J. McCarthy, right? The 5-star quarterback, the second coming, if you will. That is hard on an individual, especially a young person. And I don't have any, and no Michigan fan should have any gripe with Cade McNamara realizing that, hey, if I want to play, if I want to extend my career, I have to go somewhere else to play. Michigan fans should be nothing but thankful, because it took a guy like Cade McNamara to right this ship. After the COVID year of 2020, somebody had to do something, and it was the quarterback play, right? It wasn't anything crazy. He didn't need 5,000 yards and 70 touchdowns or anything outrageous. He didn't need to have a Joe Burrow season. What he needed to do was to be consistent and to be a leader that Michigan prides itself on, that quote unquote Michigan man. That is absolutely Cade McNamara. And it took a guy like Cade McNamara to give JJ that time to be able to learn the offense and to be able to practice and to be able to develop, to redshirt, right? To have that guy to say, hey, this is how it's supposed to be done. We made it to the college football playoff. We won the Big Ten championship. We won Ohio State. That's a leader. That's a role model. That's where the culture is built. And now it's about player-led teams, right? You have to answer to the guys next to you before you even get to the coaching staff. I think it's a beautiful position to be in, and it really sets up Michigan very, very strong, not only, for the rest of this postseason run this year, but also looking forward into 2023.
Going back to last Saturday's game in Columbus, in the first half, it certainly appeared as if Ohio State was winning the point of attack. That then shifted in the third quarter. You mentioned it, how much Michigan's been a second-half team all season long. What did you see specifically that allowed Michigan to win those battles in the third quarter, take the momentum early in the third quarter, and then carry it the rest of the way?
Well, I think that part of it is that they were able to exploit some things in the pass game by just getting the creativity in the play call, like the jump pass. Are you kidding me? Like, he really ran that at that. We see a jump pass with Tim Tebow at the goal line, right? It's not like this is something we've never seen before. I mean, that's how they used to pass the football back in 1925. Back in my day, we didn't wear face masks. We had leather helmets, but we don't see that anymore. You especially don't see it in the middle of the field. Once you get into like the Ohio State, 30-yard line or wherever they were at, I think the play calling was very, very creative. I think that they exploited that opportunity where there wasn't any deep protection. Ohio State said, we dare you to try to beat us over the top. We haven't seen it all season. Let's see if you can actually do it. JJ McCarthy threw the right pass. Playmakers made plays. Cornelius Johnson. I mean, it's not like he threw perfect balls either. I mean, the one to Colson was, that one was dynamite. But, you had Cornelius Johnson making a play on a reverse pivot spin move. Boom, right up the sideline. The second one, a little bit underthrown. Great adjustment made there by Johnson. And it was that daring, right? So now all of a sudden it's okay. They're beating us at the top. Do we really need to bite on everything? And that's when the Michigan offensive line in the second half began to have a field day. And what I thought was very interesting too is how, and I don't like to say this because I just don't like to. I don't think that there's anybody playing Division I football, Division II football, Division III football that is soft. You just don't have that. But what I do think can happen is I do think that you can break the will and the spirit of your opponent. And I think that that's what began to happen as Ohio State started to see, their poker hand, for example, they started to lose some of their chips. They didn't know necessarily how to respond. And Michigan took advantage of that. And as Ohio State's tent began to fold, Michigan pounced, right? They didn't let off the gas. We're going to throw everything at you. I think that that's what we really saw with Donovan Edwards. I mean, here's a guy out there running the football with a broken hand. The guy's got a club on his hand. He's carrying the ball with his off arm, and he's 22 carries for 216 yards and 2 touchdowns. The turf monster gets him every once in a while. He doesn't have that same sort of go after contact that Blake Corum does. And that offensive line opened up enough holes, and you get that explosiveness of Donovan Edwards. And I really think that they broke Ohio State's spirit in this football game. And that's the real question. If you're the Buckeyes, how do you regain that? Because now all of a sudden the Big Ten is running through Ann Arbor. This is a scenario that you're not used to. You've got some guys now on that program that have never beaten Michigan. And that's shocking now for those folks in Columbus. So how do they regain that? And how does Michigan continue this momentum moving forward?
I think there is a lot of similarities between the 2022 game and the 2018 game, where Michigan came into Columbus thinking that they were going to win that game, and they did not. And you had Don Brown's defense really exposed, Paris Campbell running all over the place. And I think that broke Jim Harbaugh for a couple of years. And I think you're right. This has the potential to break Ohio State for a couple of years. We'll have to see how the Buckeyes respond. I think defensively, you got to give a big tip of the cap to the Michigan secondary. Sure, C.J. Stroud had 340-plus yards passing, but he didn't put Ohio State in position to win the game. And, was Marvin Harrison Jr. even on the field for Ohio State in that game?
Yeah, he did have that one grab that was, perfectly placed ball. And the crazy part about that is if you go back and rewatch it, where's the pressure? C.J. Stroud was back there making sandwiches. He was hanging out and trying to pick his spots, and the coverage was just really good. And coverage is not only a one-on-one matchup. They got beat over the top of that Marvin Harrison touchdown reception because they decided to bring the safety from deep, right? If you're gonna send a safety, you got to get him within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage early, right? Almost as the ball is being snapped, because you can't run from 10 or 15 yards back. I mean, you see that and you take advantage of it. That's exactly what CJ Stroud did. Made the right read, made the perfect throw, and it's a touchdown in the end zone. But you look at the play that Mike Sainristil made in the end zone. You talk about a backbreaker there, punching that football loose. I mean, that's a former wide receiver converted to a DB who understands what it's like on that offensive side of the football, and not having Mike Morris out there at all. I mean, it was really incredible. The fact that Ohio State, yes, you mentioned the yardage that they put up, but couldn't really exploit Michigan's defense, considering Michigan's defense really didn't apply too much pressure.
Only one time in the red zone was Ohio State able to get a touchdown, had to settle for field goals. Certainly that was a major difference as well. So Michigan going back to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game for the second year in a row. Purdue is the opponent. Is there any reason to be concerned about a program that loves to be called the spoiler makers, because they have pulled off some upsets in years past, but they're an 8-4 team, and let's face it, the Big Ten West was not good at all this year.
Big Ten West was not good, but you don't have to be good all season to be good for one game, right? And the most important game is the next game on your schedule. And I think that really is, that's what's crucial here for Michigan. Michigan accomplished 12-0 regular season. That's great. But you only got so far. You gained so much ground. You got a lot further to go if you want to get to those next levels. And that begins Saturday night at 8:00. Why it's an 8:00 kickoff, I have no idea. But I think that what's an interesting storyline here, very unfortunate, Aiden O'Connell lost his oldest brother. And so he's been back with his family, still expected to play against Michigan. What kind of factor does that play? I mean, an emotional roller coaster for a young man who's dealing with a lot more than just a football game, and the biggest football game of his life. That's all secondary now, as he lost his brother Sean. So first and foremost, condolences to the Purdue quarterback and what he's going through right now leading into this football game. Back over to Michigan. Nothing changes, right? It's next man up. It's next opponent up. It doesn't matter if that logo says Ohio State or Purdue. At this point of the year, this is the biggest game of the season. And you have to come with that mentality that I think that they will. I think that there's a celebration period that takes place, and then there's sort of a realignment that takes place. And I think that we've seen that with Michigan football all season long. They have they've gotten their win, and it's like, okay, on to the next one. And I think that that's the mentality you have to go through, because at the end of the day, Purdue they didn't need to be good for 12 games. They were good for 8 games, right? 8-4 got them in from the Big Ten West. Now all they have to do is be good for 60 minutes. Michigan's job now is to stay focused, stay with their game plan. Hopefully Blake Corum will be a little bit healthier, but we'll have to see where that running game goes. Will we see a little bit more of CJ Stokes? Will we see a little bit more of Isaiah Gash? I mentioned Colson Loveland coming out there, the young freshman, his first touchdown reception against the Ohio State Buckeyes, trying to, fill the void, if you will, of Schoonmaker, who's trying to fill that void of Eric All. It's a team that, can Mike Morris get healthy? Can this team get a little bit healthier going into this football game? Can they take control early and bleed the clock the way that they want to with the run game? I don't expect an explosive, high-flying, the 45-yard touchdown pass here and 63. I don't expect any of that. I expect this to be a Michigan football game where they run it 30, 35, 40 times in the game. JJ throws it about 15 times, and you call it a day. You run the clock, you make it a short game, you move on to the college football playoff.
There's only 2 teams that can claim 2 wins over top 10 teams right now, Michigan and South Carolina. My question is, has Michigan done enough? Can they lose to Purdue and still make the college football playoff?
They can, but that is a road. I don't know if we want to go down that route, Mark. I don't know why you'd even put that out there like that, but you have to ask the question, right? Where does the Big Ten fall? Because then you start to look at, if Michigan handles business against Purdue and looks good doing it, which I imagine they will, foreshadowing here, and Georgia takes care of business in the SEC championship game, then those 2 are automatic locks. You got to assume that TCU will not lose in the Big 12 championship game, and then we have a rematch in the Pac-12 between USC and Utah. If USC were to lose that football game, insert Ohio State Buckeyes at 4 here, because their only loss would be to a very dominant Michigan team. That's probably the best loss. I don't know if you can make a move for 2-loss Alabama, even though their 2 losses are against, quality top 25 opponents, LSU and Tennessee, by a combined 4 points, both of which were on the road. Ohio State still has that victory against Notre Dame. They still have that victory against Penn State. Those are still meaningful. I think Ohio State could kind of flirt around if they get some help and some magic here with the Pac-12 championship and or the Big 12 championship. But boy, oh boy, don't lose this game. Just win it and finish 13-0, win the Big 10 championship, move on to the playoffs. Don't even talk about losing.
Michigan and Purdue will kick it off Saturday night in Indy. I want to thank our guest, Anthony Bellino from the X's and Bros Show. Anthony, thank you very much.
Oh, Mark, thank you. And you know what they say? It's great to be a Michigan Wolverine. We'll see you next week.